Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've got quite a fascinating figure to unpack today. You've given us a stack of sources detailing a career that's, well, incredibly versatile, almost hard to pin down.
That's right. And our mission today, it isn't just about listing credits, is it? We're trying to connect the dots, the sort of aesthetic through line, in a body of work that really jumps between worlds.
Exactly. You've got the high-pressure, like mainstream late-night comedy scene on one hand, and then this painstakingly slow, often really bleak universe of cult stop-motion animation on the other. How does one person bridge that gap?
Well, that person is Konstantinos Alexandros Stamatopoulos. Even just saying the full name, it suggests something kind of grand, right?
It really does.
But yeah, so much of his most influential stuff, it's been done from behind the scenes, behind a camera or maybe a puppet stage or, well, even behind some truly ridiculous facial hair.
Absolutely. So we're looking for that common artistic thread, the link between the writer who hammered out, what was it, 540 episodes of Late Night with Conan O'Brien?
540. Yeah. Just think about that volume. Rapid fire, high volume comedy night after night.
And then you contrast that with the creator behind Orel. I mean, that show is just this dark, deeply specific religious satire. It couldn't feel more different.
Right. And yet, there is a connection.
And of course, we can't forget the role most people probably recognize him from instantly. Alex Starburns, Osbourne on Community. It's unforgettable.
That's the visible tip of the iceberg for many, yeah. But the thread connecting all of it, I think, is satire, specifically black comedy. He has this mastery of adapting that really dark sensibility to completely different forms, different mediums.
So Stamatopoulos, born 1964, you're saying he essentially defined two totally different comedy ecosystems.
I think so. You've got the high-stakes 90s writer room, that crucible, and then there's the niche kind of creator-driven world of modern adult animation. He was foundational in both.
Okay, so to really get this, we need to go back to the beginning, the early 90s. Where does this almost impossible career trajectory actually start? Let's dig into that sketch comedy foundation.
Yeah, the foundation. And it kicks off with a really specific, almost accidental, lucky break. It's one of those great how I got started stories in comedy.
It didn't even have to do with the show he first got hired on, right?
Exactly. Stamatopoulos wasn't, a known name in Hollywood writer circles back then. He didn't come up through the usual channels like The Groundlings or Second City.
Right.
He lands his first big writing gig because the comedian Andy Dick, who he knew, convinced him, basically pushed him, to submit a spec script. A sample script.
Okay.
And the spec script was for The Simpsons.
Wow. Okay, The Simpsons, that's like the Mount Everest of spec scripts for anyone trying to break in, especially back then.
Totally. It's the gold standard. And, well, The Simpsons didn't actually hire him off that script.
Oh, okay.
But that sample, which must have shown off his sharp, character-driven comedy chops, it landed on the right desk. It got seen by the people putting together the Ben Stiller show in 1992.
And they hired him. Just like that.
Pretty much immediately onto the staff. So he essentially used, one of the most famously difficult animation show scripts as his calling card for a live-action sketch comedy show.
Yeah,
kind of wild.
That is wild. And the success wasn't gradual either, was it? It was almost instant recognition, high profile, right off the bat.
Absolutely staggering. They won the 1993 Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Writing for a Variety or Music Program. Boom! First major gig.
That's huge.
The Emmy itself is obviously crucial, yeah. But if you look at the names he won alongside, I mean, it's basically a blueprint for the next 2 decades of American comedy.
Who else is on that list?
You've got Judd Apatow, Robert Cohen, David Cross, Brent Forrester, Jeff Kahn, Bruce Kirschbaum, Bob Odenkirk, and Ben Stiller himself, of course. It wasn't just an award. It showed he was immediately placed in the absolute top tier of comedy writing talent at that moment.
Wow. He was literally in the room where it happened, shaping modern comedy.
Pretty much. He was right there as the sort of modern rules of comedy were being written and rewritten.
And you mentioned Bob Odenkirk in that list. That seems like a really key connection, especially looking at where Stamatopoulos' career went next. Stiller and Apatow obviously went on to define film comedy.
Right. But for Stamatopoulos' specific path, that Odenkirk relationship is absolutely fundamental. That's the key professional alliance, you could say.
Where did that start?
Right there on the Ben Stiller show. That's where they first clicked. And you can see why, right? Their collaboration seems defined by this shared love for character-based absurdity, but also really pointed satire. And they just kept working together. It carried on through Late Night with Conan O'Brien and then, crucially, on to Mr. Show. These 90s writer rooms, they really were like incubators, weren't they? Forging these lifelong creative partnerships under intense pressure.
Yeah, you can see that. And speaking of intense pressure, that Emmy win, it led directly into what you called the late-night crucible. The Ben Stiller show, despite the Emmy, it got canceled pretty quickly.
Yeah, classic Fox. Brilliant show, short life.
So Stamatopoulos had to shift gears, moves to New York, right?
Yeah.
And just dives headfirst into the daily grind of late-night television.
Headfirst is right. And that grind, that's where the numbers just become kind of mind-boggling. Mythological, almost.
You mentioned the Conan number before.
540 writing credits for Late Night with Conan O'Brien between 1993 and 1999. Just pause and think about that for a second.
It's enormous.
540 episodes. That means contributing material, jokes, sketches, day in, day out for this nightly machine for 6 straight years. That's not just a job, you know? It's like an intellectual boot camp for comedy writing.
You'd have to master so much, obviously delivering under that constant punishing deadline, but also the specific tone of early Conan, right?
Yeah.
That intellectual absurdism, the self-aware kind of meta-comedy. It was really different from the sketch stuff he'd done on Stiller.
Completely different beast. And that's the psychological aspect we should probably touch on. In sketch, you might spend weeks polishing a few perfect minutes. In late night, especially back then, you're churning out a constant stream of ideas. Jokes, absurd bits, topical stuff. Aiming for good enough, often, knowing most of it vanishes by the next morning. It has to fundamentally change how you approach writing.
You internalize it.
Exactly. Joke structures, character voices. It gets baked into your DNA at an almost atomic level. You just have to generate.
And it wasn't just Conan during that period, was it? He was juggling.
Nope. He was moonlighting, essentially, over at CBS, too. He logged, I think the sources said, 131 writing credits for The Late Show with David Letterman. That was between 96 and 97.
So he's writing for Conan and Letterman concurrently for a bit. That's wow.
Yeah. Talk about being a utility player. He's working within the distinctly different comedic voices of the two absolute giants of late night at the time.
And their voices were distinct. Letterman had that more observational, maybe slightly cynical, sophisticated New York feel.
Right. Polished irony.
While Conan embraced just sheer unchecked silliness sometimes, high absurdity.
Totally. And the fact that Stamatopoulos could navigate both, contribute meaningfully to both, it shows he wasn't just a one-trick pony. He wasn't defined by a single style. He was a master chameleon, operating at the highest level of TV satire writing.
We should also quickly mention the Dana Carvey show, another one of those brilliant but short-lived sketch shows from that era.
Absolutely. That show was legendary for its writing staff, too. Stamatopoulos was there, not just writing, but also stepping in front of the camera a bit.
Oh, yeah. What kind of roles?
The sources mentioned things like Guy in Nixon mask or being one of the Wazir brothers, you know, typical bizarre sketch characters. But it shows, even early on, he wasn't strictly confined to the writer's room. He was willing to, embody the weirdness he was helping create.
That definitely foreshadows things to come, like Starburns.
For sure. And even on Conan, while he was primarily this powerhouse writer behind the scenes, he did leave an on-screen footprint, too, with these deep-cut bits that became part of the show's, internal mythology.
Oh, like what?
Characters like Tamori the ostrich, the kiss-ass turkey, or his recurring, slightly creepy Abe Lincoln impressions.
I think I remember the Lincoln.
Yeah, these weren't just throwaway appearances. They show a performer willing to fully commit to the most ridiculous, often low-budget character concepts. And that sensibility, that willingness to embrace the absurd and the cheap is absolutely key to understanding his later work, especially on Adult Swim.
Okay, so he conquers the mainstream high-volume world, proves he can deliver top-tier comedy 5 nights a week for years. But here's a question that springs to mind. Given that level of success, that stability, 540 credits on Conan, that's a steady gig. Why pivot? Why move into the niche, often low-audience world of something like Mr. Show? Was that a professional risk, or was it more of an artistic necessity for him?
I think you hit it with the second one. It feels absolutely like an artistic necessity.
Yeah.
And it's a really crucial pivot point that takes us neatly into our next section. Cult status and the shift towards creator roles. After mastering that relentless, joke-a-minute pace of late night, the chance to work on something like Mr. Show must have felt like breathing different air. It was collaborative, deeply strange, and allowed him to build something more cohesive, more artistically ambitious, maybe.
And the sources confirm this was a deepening of that Odenkirk collaboration, right?
Right.
Mr. Show with Bob and David.
Yeah.
That ran from 96 to 98.
Yeah, he's right back with Odenkirk. And his role there starts to evolve significantly. He's still writing, contributes 21 writing credits, and he's acting more too. About 13 acting credits, playing various weirdos.
Still doing both.
Still doing both, but the big change, the really important shift, is he steps into production. He served as a producer and also a consulting producer for 10 episodes.
Oh, okay. So that's new.
That's the moment, I think, where he stops being just a brilliant staff writer and starts becoming someone who manages the whole creative and logistical process of making a show. He's learning how to, build the whole boat, not just pull an oar.
That production experience had to be absolutely vital for everything that came later when he started creating his own shows.
Undoubtedly. Which leads us to another interesting footnote, maybe, in animation history. The TV Funhouse experiment. This was with Robert Smigel.
Oh, right. Smigel of SNL's TV Funhouse cartoons, the ambiguously gay duo, stuff like that.
Exactly. So TV Funhouse, the show, this was around 2000, 2001, was an attempt to take those beloved, often notorious SNL animated shorts, known for their dark humor, their puppet stuff, the crude animation, and spin them off into their own half-hour sketch comedy series on Comedy Central.
And Stamatopoulos was involved in that.
Heavily involved, both writing and acting again. Characters like Chicky, Mr. Whiskers, names that probably don't ring a bell for most.
Probably not, no.
But here you have these two sort of geniuses of dark, puppet-based, boundary-pushing satire, Smigel and Stamatopoulos, trying to bring that very specific sensibility to a weekly network show.
And how did that go? The sources say, not well.
Yeah, it was quick. Canceled after just one season, which is fascinating, right? Why did that specific brand of comedy, which feels so prescient now, fail to connect back in 2000, only to basically dominate niche cable a few years later?
Timing, maybe? Context?
I think it's got to be timing and context. In 2000, that kind of high-concept, cynical, puppet-heavy satire probably just felt weird. Uncomfortable for a general audience, maybe expecting something more like The Simpsons or even South Park. It hadn't quite found its natural home yet.
Too dark. Too specific.
Maybe all of the above, and perhaps, ironically, too slow or handcrafted compared to the, faster, cruder cutout style that South Park had popularized.
But he didn't give up on sketch or writing, did he?
No, not at all. The sources show he kept his hand in. He wrote for 50 episodes of Mad TV between 2002 and 2004.
Wow, 50 episodes. That's substantial.
Yeah, keeping those sketch muscles flexed. And he even did some voice work for Saturday Night Live around that time, 4 episodes, including, interestingly, voicing Michael Jackson in something.
Huh. Okay. But the real shift, the moment he finds that proper home for his sensibility, that came with Adult Swim, didn't it?
Absolutely. This is the turning point. He stops just working for established networks or shows and starts actively pioneering the unique, strange, often quite dark comedy that would become the absolute signature aesthetic of Adult Swim in its early formative years.
He was there right at the beginning of that whole wave.
Pretty much. This is the era where he really leans into his black comedy roots, the stuff that maybe didn't fly on network TV. He worked as a writer and, crucially, a creative consultant on the first season of Tom Goes to the Mayor.
Ah, the Tim and Eric show.
Woo!
With Bob Odenkirk involved, too, right?
Exactly. That holy trinity of weirdness, Tim Heidecker, Eric Wareheim, and Odenkirk. And Stamatopoulos is there consulting. That show, Tom Goes to the Mayor, 2004-2005, was intentionally visually abrasive. Purposefully cheap-looking, uncomfortable, using that very limited photo animation style.
Yeah, it was like nothing else on TV.
And Stamatopoulos was right there, helping to shape that new comedic language. A language where awkwardness, bad taste, and purposeful low production value weren't bugs, they were features. They were part of the joke itself.
He also really embraced voice acting in that Adult Swim space, didn't he?
Oh, totally. He provided the voice for the main character, Drinky Crow, on The Drinky Crow Show, which was based on a comic strip by Tony Millionaire. That ran 2007 to 2009.
Drinky Crow. Okay, these names are definitely deep cuts.
They are. But they show his commitment to this specific, dark, absurdist animated sandbox that Adult Swim was becoming. He's voicing this drunken, suicidal crow alongside characters like Lieutenant Vronsky. It's not mainstream fare.
No kidding. So what's fascinating then is watching that evolution, right? From the high-polished, high-volume joke factory of Conan to the low-fidelity, often self-driven, experimental vibe of early Adult Swim. It feels like he consciously traded maybe financial security and massive exposure for something else.
Absolute creative control, I'd argue, and the freedom to explore genuinely bleak, uncomfortable themes that would never fly on network. And this whole period, it's perfectly setting the stage for his own breakthrough as a creator, as a showrunner.
Which brings us, to the moment where he really carves out his own distinct aesthetic, creates a work that feels foundational, really, to a lot of modern Black comedy animation. We got a deep dive into Moral Orel.
Yes, Moral Orel. If you were to pick one project that encapsulates the Stamatopoulos sensibility, this might be it. It's his masterpiece of, like, satirical horror, almost.
Okay, break it down for us. What was it?
It's a stop-motion animated series, premiered bizarrely on Christmas Day 2005 on Adult Swim. And visually, it looks like, you know, those classic Rankin Bass holiday specials, Rudolph Santa Claus is coming to town.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
That slightly jerky, charming handmade look.
Exactly that aesthetic.
Yeah.
But he takes that sweet, childlike visual style and applies it to this story about a young boy, Orel Puppington. Orel is relentlessly optimistic, maybe pathologically so, and he lives in this fictional, hyper-religious, middle American town called Morrilton, state of state soda.
I gotcha. And the premise?
The premise is just brilliant satire. Orel constantly tries to do the right thing according to the very rigid, often deeply hypocritical and contradictory moral guidance he gets from his church, his community, and especially his repressed alcoholic father, Clay.
And he takes it all literally, right?
Always literally, which inevitably leads to just absolute chaos, usually involving sin, misunderstanding scripture in the worst possible way, and often resulting in severe violence or emotional trauma for the townsfolk or for Orel himself.
So that visual style, the innocent look, is completely deceptive.
That's the key to the whole thing. It looks charming, nostalgic, pulls you in with that familiar warmth, and then it just sucker punches you with incredibly sharp, intellectual, and utterly bleak writing about faith, hypocrisy, abuse, you name it.
And he was deeply involved in this one, not just writing.
Oh, totally running it. The sources say he got 37 writing credits across the 3 seasons, and he directed 8 episodes himself. That level of control over the look, the scripts, the pacing, the performances, that's what allowed Moral Orel to achieve its unique, often devastating tone.
So just talk about that technical choice again. Stop motion. He could write live action, obviously. He'd work on cheap, limited animation like Tom Goes to the Mayor. Why choose stop motion? It's notoriously slow, agonizing work.
Well, if you think about it thematically, stop motion is almost the ultimate antithesis to the fast-paced, disposable world of late-night writing he came from.
Oh, yeah. That's a great point.
Stop motion is painstaking. Every tiny movement, every subtle shift in a puppet's expression takes hours of physical manipulation by animators, frame by frame. For a show like Moral Orel, which digs into these deep-seated issues, religious hypocrisy, generational trauma, slow-burn existential dread, that methodical, slightly unnatural visual medium works perfectly.
How so?
It gives everything this uncanny valley feeling, doesn't it? The characters look humanish, but not quite real. Their movements are deliberate, sometimes jerky. Human behavior, when filtered through these puppets, looks both familiar and deeply, deeply unsettling. It mirrors the unsettling nature of the town itself.
And the show didn't just stick to one tone, did it? The sources mentioned a pretty famous or infamous tonal shift in the 3rd season.
Oh, yeah. That shift is legendary among fans. It's arguably one of the most drastic and I'd say artistically courageous moves ever made in animated TV.
What happened?
Well, the first 2 seasons, while dark, were still largely high-concept Black comedy, you know, based on Orel's disastrous misinterpretations of religion leading to funny, albeit dark, outcomes. But season 3, particularly the episodes that focus on Orel's father, Clay, and his backstory. The show just shifts abruptly into straight-up, harrowing drama. It starts exploring, really unflinchingly, themes of childhood abuse, alcoholism, repressed sexuality, marital despair, intergenerational trauma. The comedy just evaporates, and the show becomes genuinely, profoundly tragic, using the same cute puppets.
That must have been incredibly jarring for the audience. Taking these cartoon puppets and suddenly demanding you take their pain seriously is drama?
Exactly. It shocked people. But it worked because Stamatopoulos had built up this world, used the inherent trust and familiarity of that stop-motion style, and then weaponized it, basically, to deliver this unexpected, genuine, emotional gut punch. It proved he wasn't just about jokes. He was capable of really profound, difficult storytelling.
So Moral Orel ends its run, final episode in late 2008, though there was a follow-up special later in 2012. Did he stick with stop motion after that?
He did. He clearly found his niche there. He followed it up pretty directly with another stop-motion series for Adult Swim called Mary Shelley's Frankenhole. That ran for 2 seasons, between 2010 and 2012.
Franco, okay. Same vibe.
Similar dark, satirical, character-driven vibe, yeah,
Ew.
using stop motion again. And on this one, he was, again, the creator, writer, producer, and also a major voice actor. He voiced characters like Death, the Mummy, and even Mother Teresa, I believe.
She calls Mother Teresa. Okay.
So again, he's building this entire bizarre universe pretty much from the ground up, controlling the aesthetic, infusing it with his very particular brand of historical and religious absurdity. It really solidified his signature style on Adult Swim.
He did briefly try other animation styles too, right? High School USA.
Yeah, that was in 2013, a more traditional 2D animated show co-created with him. He was creator, writer, producer, and voiced one of the main characters, Mr. Merriweather. It was maybe a bit lighter, but still had that satirical edge.
But his commitment to stop motion clearly runs deep, because it wasn't just for his own Adult Swim comedies. He got involved in feature film production with it too.
Right. And this is a really significant step, I think, showing his evolution and his respect for the craft itself. He served as a producer on the 2015 stop-motion animated feature film Anomalisa.
Directed by Charlie Kaufman. That's a serious film, not exactly a comedy.
Not at all. Anomalisa is high art. It's existential drama, intensely emotional, technically brilliant stop motion, a world away from the fast-paced, cynical satire of Adult Swim, even though it shares the medium.
So the fact that he, Dino Stamatopoulos, was involved in producing that film, an Oscar-nominated drama, what does that tell you?
It tells me his dedication to stop motion goes beyond just using it for his own specific comedic purposes. He's validating the craft itself as a serious, powerful, artistic medium capable of telling complex adult stories. He's investing in its legitimacy.
Okay, so while he's knee-deep in the painstaking world of art house stop motion, there's this completely parallel track happening, the thing he's probably most famous for, visually.
Yep. While he's producing Kaufman, he's simultaneously walking around the Greendale Community College set with giant stars glued to his face.
Which brings us perfectly into Section 4. Community, the legend of Starburns, and how all this eventually leads to him building his own industry infrastructure.
Right. The Community years, roughly 2009 to 2015, they perfectly encapsulate that dual identity he had developed in the comedy world.
How so?
Well, behind the scenes, he was a major creative force. The sources list him as a consulting producer for 37 episodes and a consulting writer for 24 episodes. That means he was deeply involved in shaping the show's overall structure, its tone, breaking stories in the writer's room.
So way more than just an actor dropping in.
Oh, absolutely. He was part of the core creative brain trust, especially working closely with Dan Harmon. But he did more than just consult in the traditional sense. He actually used his very specific animation expertise to directly contribute to some of the show's most ambitious episodes.
Key animated ones.
Exactly. He wrote 2 key animated episodes that really leveraged his unique background.
Which one?
He wrote Abed's Uncontrollable Christmas back in 2010, and that entire episode was done in
Stop motion, of course.
Yep. His preferred medium. It was like this perfect Trojan horse, wasn't it? It took the experimental, slightly dark, emotionally intense style he'd honed on Orel and folded it right into the quirky, established universe of a major network sitcom.
And it worked. It won an Emmy for animation, didn't it?
It did. It proved that his cult aesthetic, when paired with the strong character work and writing of Community, actually had broad appeal. It wasn't too weird for network if done right.
What was the other animated episode he wrote?
That was G.I. Jeff in 2014, which was done in the style of the classic 80s G.I. Joe cartoons. So that showed his versatility, again, adapting his comedic voice and understanding of animation history to a completely different but equally high-concept visual style.
Incredible range. Consultant, writer, animation expert, and then, the acting role, the massive irony of Alex Starburns' Osbourne.
It's just the ultimate meta joke, isn't it? Here's this guy who spent decades as this incredibly influential but largely unseen force in comedy, writing hundreds of episodes, producing shows, shaping aesthetics, and his face becomes instantly recognizable to millions.
Because he plays a background character with ridiculous sideburns who spends most of his time complaining about his nickname.
Exactly. My name is Alex. The character is iconic, though. The huge, poorly drawn, star-shaped sideburns, the weird lizard he sometimes carried, the constant protest.
How many episodes was he actually in?
Sources say 39 episodes of Starburns, mostly as this kind of background texture character, which is funny because in a way, Starburns is almost like a physical manifestation of Stamatopoulos' own career journey up to that point.
You know what I mean?
Well, here's someone with incredible depth, complexity, a whole hidden history of creative work. constantly trying to escape this simple, shallow label people put on him, the guy who wrote for Conan or just Starburns. But ultimately, he's kind of defined in the public eye by that one memorable, singular visual gimmick. There's a layer of irony there he must appreciate.
Has to. Now, this whole experience on Community, being both a key creative architect and a highly visible, almost cult figure actor, seems to have led directly to a major business venture, right? Starburns Industries.
Yes, this is the critical next step. The transition from being a practitioner, a creator, an artist, to becoming an infrastructure builder. He co-founded the production company Starburns Industries with community creator Dan Harmon.
Starburns Industries. Not subtle.
Not subtle at all, but it makes perfect sense. Starburns Industries feels like the physical realization of everything he'd learned and mastered up to that point. It's set up as a hub designed specifically to combine that high-concept, often absurdist comedy sensibility with specialized animation production.
And his deep expertise in stop motion was obviously a core part of that. Didn't they produce Anomalisa?
They did. That was one of their first big projects. Producing Charlie Kaufman's Anomalisa immediately established the company's credentials for handling serious, high-quality, artistically ambitious animation. It showed they weren't just about, goofy Adult Swim stuff. They had range.
But they didn't just focus on art house cinema, did they? They leveraged their sketch comedy roots, too.
Oh, yeah. They also produced W. Bob and David in 2015, the Netflix revival of Mr. Show, which brought him right back into collaboration with Odenkirk and Cross.
So that perfectly illustrates the company's mission then, right? Bridging those worlds.
Exactly. They're bridging the gap between the high art stop motion world of someone like Kaufman and the cult sketch comedy world of Odenkirk and Cross. And you also see his fingerprints on other adjacent projects around this time. He was an executive producer on the 2014 documentary Harmontown, about Dan Harmon's podcast tour.
So he's getting involved in that whole burgeoning alt-comedy podcasting scene, too.
Right. He's taking all the lessons learned from the pressure cooker of 90s late night, the creative freedom of Adult Swim, the collaborative energy of Community, and he's building a factory. A system designed to enable and produce the unique, strange, often difficult voices of 21st century comedy and animation.
And his production roles kept diversifying after that, too.
Yeah, the sources show him continuing to work across different genres and platforms. He was co-executive producer on Louis C.K.'s self-funded, self-distributed web series Horace and Pete.
Which was really different. Dark, theatrical, super realistic drama. Almost like watching a play.
Totally different feel. And he was also a consulting producer on Great Minds with Dan Harmon. So it's clear his influence now is less about being the sole creator on everything and more about enabling, producing, consulting, applying his unique structural knowledge and aesthetic sensibility across a wider range of projects. He knows how to take a niche, maybe difficult idea, whether that's bleak animation or hyper-realistic web drama, and help bring it to life logistically and creatively.
And the most recent thing listed in our sources for his own creation was an unaired animated pilot.
Yeah, called The Black Hole from 2021. He created it, starred in it, didn't get picked up, it seems, but it shows he's still generating his own original concepts alongside the producing work.
Okay, let's pivot slightly. We've tracked the TV and film work, the animation, the production company. Let's look at his more personal ventures for a minute, specifically his deep dive into podcasting. This seems to reveal quite a bit about his roots and maybe his need for a more direct, self-directed creative outlet.
Yeah, the podcasting world is interesting for him, and it actually takes us back to his origins, his Chicago roots. Stamatopoulos was apparently a longtime, really devoted fan of the legendary Chicago radio personality Steve Dahl.
Oh, wow. Steve Dahl. Huge name in Chicago radio history.
Absolutely. And that deep admiration, that fandom, eventually led to Stamatopoulos hosting his first podcast called Sorry About Everything. That ran from May 2012 to June 2013, and it's actually on the Steve Dahl Network. So a direct connection there.
Sorry About Everything, that title. It has another connection too, doesn't it?
It does. It's deeply personal. That's also the name of his rock band. He's the vocalist and guitarist in a band called Sorry About Everything.
So the podcast title reflects the band name.
Yeah, and I think it signifies how his comedic and personal output often seems channeled through this consistent sensibility, right? Slightly self-deprecating, darkly reflective, maybe a bit apologetic, but also defiant. He takes his own life, his own anxieties, and turns them into content, whether that's a rock song, a podcast, or a deeply cynical stop-motion puppet show about religious trauma. It all feels connected.
Okay, so after that first podcast on the Dahl Network, he starts another major one later, right? A weekly show.
Yeah, in late 2016, He teamed up with his longtime friend, the comedian Andy Dick, to start Dino and Andy's Skull Juice. It was initially produced by Feral Audio, which was a big podcast network at the time.
Skull Juice. Okay, that sounds different from Sorry About Everything. Yeah, the vibe was definitely different. Skull Juice was much more chaotic, often unscripted, relying on their, sometimes volatile chemistry. It was a real contrast to the meticulous, controlled structure of his stop-motion animation work.
But that chaos maybe became an issue. The sources mention a pretty critical turning point for that podcast. They do. This is where things take a sharp turn. The sources are quite clear that in mid-2018, Andy Dick was asked to leave the podcast. The reason cited was an on-air incident of hostility.
Wow, okay. So that must have forced a major change.
A radical, immediate change. It necessitated a complete rebranding of the show. And that incident, it seems, forced a moment of genuine reevaluation for Stamatopoulos. Maybe moving away from embracing that kind of chaotic, potentially harmful volatility in unscripted comedy and shifting towards creating a more controlled, predictable environment.
So what did it become?
The subsequent rebranding was, well, pretty striking, and maybe speaks volumes. The show became Dino and Dana's Safe Space.
From Skull Juice to Safe Space. That's quite a statement.
Isn't it? The name change itself feels like commentary. He brought in his friend and frequent guest, the voice actor Dana Snyder.
Master Shake from Aqua Teen Hunger Force.
The very same. Snyder replaced Dick as the main co-host, and they also brought on additional regular co-hosts, Letitia Tish Burns and Spencer Crittenden, who's known from Harmontown.
So a bigger team, a deliberately different name. What does that pivot tell you? From Skull Juice chaos to Safe Space.
To me, it shows a deliberate attempt to, curate the comedic environment more carefully, perhaps reflecting all those lessons learned over decades in different creative structures, the high-pressure writer rooms, the collaborative but sometimes messy world of cult comedy. It feels like he reached a point where, for his own personal creative outlet, he maybe wanted structure and reliability, not constant unpredictability and potential hostility.
Seeking safety, maybe, in his own creative space.
Could be. It speaks to a certain maturity in his career, perhaps. He's no longer just chasing the joke wherever it leads. He's actively controlling the environment in which the joke gets delivered, ensuring a more sustainable and, maybe literally safer space for creative expression.
And just to round out the picture, the sources mention briefly his personal life.
Just briefly, yeah. Notes that he is married and has one daughter, which, provides maybe a steady anchor or grounding amidst a career that has spanned such wild creative extremes.
Okay, so let's try and pull this all together now. We've gone from late-night joke machines to Emmy-winning sketch to cult animation to Starburns to production companies to podcasting sagas. If you have to step back and synthesize this incredible sprawling journey, what's the core takeaway for someone trying to understand Dino Stamatopoulos' impact?
The synthesis, I think, is that his career is just this masterclass in versatility. But it's not random versatility. It's anchored by this unwavering artistic commitment to a specific sensibility. Satire, usually dark, black comedy.
Right.
He learned speed and volume in the intense forge of 90s late night. Then in the 2000s, particularly with Adult Swim and stop motion, he learned control, depth, and how to build entire worlds. He essentially used the high-pressure training from the mainstream to help define the dark, weird, creator-driven aesthetic of the niche.
And that unique niche he carved out. It seems to be about using seemingly innocent or unexpected forms like children's holiday special aesthetics, puppets, even the goofy look of Starburns to deliver these incredibly sharp, often quite brutal critiques.
Exactly. Critiques of human nature, hypocrisy, faith, society. He mastered the joke structure early on, but then he mastered the delivery system. The artistic medium required to make that specific kind of dark joke land with maximum, often uncomfortable impact. Whether that delivery system was a quick cutaway gag on Letterman or an agonizingly slow 10-second puppet movement conveying despair on Moral Orel.
He found the right tool for each specific dark job.
Precisely. Which leads us, I think, to the final provocative thought we can leave you, the listener, with. Something to mull over. It concerns this evolution we tracked from him being primarily a content creator to becoming more of an infrastructure builder.
Okay.
So if his early career was really defined by writing for established comedy giants, people like Stiller, Letterman, Conan.
Right, working within their systems.
And his middle career was defined by creating his own groundbreaking niche content like Moral Orel, Frankenhole.
Building his own unique things.
What are the implications, then, of his later work focusing more on producing, on applying those unique comedic sensibilities and that hard-won production knowledge to larger collaborative industry structures like Starburns Industries?
Right. What does happen when a master of cult comedy,
Yeah.
someone who genuinely understands how to make difficult, specific, maybe commercially risky art, stops just making the art themselves and starts building the factory, building the system, the funding mechanisms, the support structure that allows other people, maybe equally strange or niche artists, to make their similar kind of art?
The influence shifts, doesn't it? It
Yeah.
potentially moves from being primarily about the specific content he creates to being about the infrastructure he enables. It's like the ultimate evolution, maybe, from practitioner to patron, or maybe patron isn't the right word, maybe enabler, facilitator.
Architect.
Yeah, architect of a certain kind of creative ecosystem. So his legacy isn't just the brilliant, dark shows he personally created, but potentially also the whole system he helped formalize and build. A system designed to foster and produce exactly that kind of challenging, satirical, often darkly funny work, all rooted somehow in a dedication to black comedy, and maybe, just maybe, a really memorable star-shaped set of sideburns.
That is definitely something to think about, a truly unique path through the industry. That's the deepest dive we can take for today. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.